Jason, I want to thank you for joining me on this month's Have a Drink with Alan. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The week of Christmas has got to be crazy for you, and I do really appreciate it. Things are going quite well for you, it seems like. I'd love an update on your business, but let's start with a little bit of background, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Give us the story of how you got started and your grandfather.
Yeah, so my great-grandfather was 9 years old, was the oldest boy in his family, and there were enough mouths to feed that paying for that was becoming a challenge. So he dropped out of school and got a job in the local factory sweeping floors. And that happened to be a button factory owned by Edsel Schatz. So my grandfather, really grew up, great-grandfather, so I grew up working there. Edsel actually gave him a horse during World War I so that he could be in the Rochester Cavalry Battalion. And he worked the rest of his life for Schatz Associates. My grandfather served in Korea in the Army Air Corps, came back, wanted to marry my grandmother, so he took a job with his father for one summer. It was in the 50s, and by the mid-80s, my grandfather had bought out the other partners in the company and was the sole owner circa 1980. So then you get to the mid-90s, my grandfather is getting ready to retire. My mom takes over the factory. I come along, it was holiday break, summer vacation, was spent on the couch in my grandfather's office, and he'd find little tasks for me to do, probably just keep me out of his hair. And one of those tasks was sorting these buttons. And we discovered that I didn't do it very well. And it wasn't for lack of trying, I was colorblind. So the joke became that if I took over the family button company and went for a fourth generation, we'd only be able to make black buttons. So that's how we got our name.
Outstanding. Great story.
I did not particularly want to go into the family business. I wanted to study politics. I did study politics. I got a degree from Cortland, SUNY Cortland, and went down to Capitol Hill and worked on Capitol Hill clerking for a congressman, but luckily minored in accounting. And after a few years in politics, found myself in a sales and accounting role. And after a few years of that, decided that I did want to work for myself. I did want to move back to the Rochester area. So it seemed perfectly reasonable at 24 years old to quit my job, sell my house, clear out my 401k, and buy a still to make whiskey for a living.
Makes sense to me,
It wasn't
man.
quite that random. I had written an entire business plan. I had lined up an SBA loan. I had gotten a master distilling certificate out on the West Coast. All of that being driven by several of my customers at the accounting company were breweries and distilleries. And I found that I liked working with my hands, managing this complex and high barrier to entry business. It was going to be hard to get into, but it would also be hard for people to catch us. And so we set about making New York bourbon from New York grown grains. And we've been running a grain to glass craft distillery in Rochester, New York since 2012.
Congratulations, Jason. It's no small accomplishment, for sure.
It has been a wild adventure.
Indeed. What does it mean to have a Rochester-style bourbon? Is it the grains?
So to us, it's kind of a combination of factors. So it's the quality of the grain that's grown down in the Genesee Valley, where the topsoil is over 400 feet thick, deposited there during the last ice age. Is the quality of the water, which is some of the most limestone-rich, sulfur-free, iron-free water available in the United States today. It's the process. We practice what's called double pot distillation. You can't really make large volumes of whiskey that way. The big multinationals all use big column stills, but we run our whiskey twice through a pot, kind of the way they make Scotch. Irish whiskey runs through a pot 3 times. But American whiskey is generally made on a column. So it provides more flavor, richer aromas, more of that grain presence. And then the last piece is the weather. So, if you're familiar with dressing for all 4 seasons in one day in Western New York, that actually makes really good whiskey. So as the barrels heat and contract in our warehouses, they push that whiskey in and out of the barrel. and that's what gives it this great color and a lot of that great flavor.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. Thank you for explaining that. Can you tell me what your grains are, or is that a proprietary piece of information?
No, we actually print it right on the back of the bottle. We're
Fair
very
enough.
open about it. So it's 60% Wasapi Valley corn, 9% Danko rye, 11% malted barley, 2-row malted barley, and then soft winter wheat for the last 20%. So it's a wheated bourbon with a splash of rye. Most bourbons are going to be primarily 70-80% corn, and then about 10-15% of these other grains.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, you have a fantastic product. We are a big fan in my household, for sure.
Thank you.
So you want to talk about other products like your liquor, gin, vodka, craft cocktails especially?
Yeah, so we make a total of 45 products. That some of those are just different sizes of the same item, and some of them are derivatives of each other. So like our 4-grain bourbon is our primary bourbon, but we have it available both as a blend, which is many barrels coming together, a single barrel, which only happens about 1% of the time when that barrel has everything we're looking for, a double barrel, which means it has been through 2 new American white oak casks, like the one I have in my hand here. We also use that as the base for our bourbon cream, which is like an Irish cream, but better because we don't have to put any anticoagulants in it. We get to use really good quality farm fresh cream from Batavia, New York, mixed with our bourbon and a little caramel and sugar, and that really pops here on the delivery at 6:30 last Friday night. A store that was running out and couldn't imagine going into the week without before Christmas without it.
That's a nice compliment.
We also have a line of vodka and gins, because while whiskey takes 4 to 8 years to get ready, vodka and gin gets made in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So.
Columns? Do you have a column system for those?
We do, yes. So at this point, we have 4 stills. We have our little 50-gallon-a-day R&D pot still that we can make, test batches on. Our original 350-gallon-a-day hybrid pot and column still is what I started with 12 years ago, where we can make whiskey, vodka, or gin. And then our new column still that we put in with our new plant back in 2023 manages 350 gallons an hour of mash in a continuous flow. So our pots, they start cold in the morning and heat up over the course of the day and cool down overnight. The continuous columns, you're continuously injecting small amounts of mash into the top of that column and moving it through the system. So truly transformative, fundamentally different technology that we then custom design to work through with our process, as well as that of our co-packing clients.
Annualize that for me. I don't have a calculator to do the math, and it's too complicated for my brain. Is that over 1 million gallons a year?
Oh yeah. That I was going to say, we do. 350 times 24 times 365. It's actually a little over 3 million gallons of mash a year once we're at full capacity.
That is a significant
we'll
production
do about
facility.
A quarter of that this year.
Congratulations. We've done a lot of work with distilleries. That is a significant production facility you have there. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, the plant's rated capacity is about 14,000 full-size barrels. That makes us by far the largest beverage producer here in New York State today.
Congratulations.
Some of the breweries are a little bigger. Budweiser has that one over by Syracuse.
They don't count. You want to talk about bespoke bourbon blending program? Is there something interesting there? Or wine and spirits education, trust? Love to hear about that.
One of the things that I think is probably one of the things that's probably the most interesting about how Black Button puts whiskey together, I think people just assume that if you do all the things the same in brewing and fermentation and distillation, that you get the same result. But that barrel is so important to the final flavor of that whiskey, as well as where it is in the warehouse and the seasons, but even just the wood that barrel is made from. Was that tree younger or older? Was it on a spot in the ground that had a lot of minerality? Did it have good access to water, so it grew quickly, or poor access to water? I mean, even what side of the mountain it's on dramatically impacts the taste. So since there's no way to track any of that for each of the individual staves, every barrel ends up aging differently. It's one of the reasons why single barrels are so special, is because everything has to go right, and that only happens about 1% of the time. So what we've done for years is when our barrels come ready, our team is tasting them. We either put them in, we pre-select them into our sweet, spice, oak, or base tank. And then we're going to start proofing that whiskey down with about 20 other barrels. And then we're going to blend across those 4 tanks to make our traditional blue label so that we get that signature black button flavor that consumers have come to know and love. But what we realized is if you take those tanks and you start to adjust the ratios between them, maybe put in a little more sweet, a little more spice, a little less of the oak, depending on what that client wants, you get a product that is still distinctly black button, but also really unique to that client. So whether that's a liquor store or a private company, or even just a group of friends that come in and want to do their own bottling, they get to drive that flavor after barrel maturation. And I don't know that there's another program like it in the United States today. It's a really cool thing, and really came out of our desire to share what makes our whiskey special with folks.
That is spectacular. Mass customization, that is spectacular. Thank you for sharing that, for sure.
And you don't have to be as big as you would think. I mean, we'll do it for 120 bottles. Yeah, I do realize that's 10 cases. You got to get some friends together, but it's not like you got to buy a tractor trailer load. You just got to have a good party plan.
Well, I could do that myself, actually. We got to talk after this interview. I do have a question. Where we deal in the wine industry, spirits industry, and the beer industry, as you know. And what I'm reading and seeing in the wine industry is a lot of shift away from alcohol content, lowering proofs and non-alcoholic beverage options. What are you seeing in spirits, specifically bourbon, obviously, but are you seeing the desire for high proof or traditionally normal proof spirits changing over time?
So we're certainly seeing it change over time. Different groups in the population are doing different things with it. So, older generations, folks, my age and up, who are, have come of age drinking spirits, are maybe moderating their consumption a little bit.
I don't think you're older generation,
but they're also choosing to drink better quality stuff as they're drinking a little bit less of it. It's really a demographic shift with the younger generation, where they, through, great work of responsibility.org and reprioritizing health, and I think having maybe a little less access to money in their youth, didn't necessarily, end up consuming a lot of alcohol during their formative college years, and are continuing that trend as they age up. Also, we're just having more options, whether that be THC or functional beverage. And I think there's, again, a renewed interest in health. So that's impacting wine a lot more than spirits. Spirits even seems to be winning some of those consumers over. Less calories, the ability to modify that drink to your own liking at the end. When you get a beer, you get a wine, you just pour it, and you can change the glass, you can change the temperature. But in general, you're kind of going with what that artist made. Whereas if you're having a bourbon and ginger or bourbon and soda, if you want to make that stretch out, you can always just add a little more ginger or soda, and before you know it, you're in control of that situation.
Interesting.
So I think the overall trend is a little less volume, but I think that will work out well for some of the higher quality craft producers like ourselves who provide that unique experience consumers still seem to crave.
Great response, and I agree with you completely. That's very helpful as well. Thank you for contrasting that for me. What are you seeing in the M&A space? Got to ask you that question, right?
Yes.
in the spirits universe, what are you seeing?
We've certainly seen the M&A in spirits change dramatically over the last couple of years. Still some notable transactions, Svedka, Buzzball. The established players are really going for what is an easy volume add. I think we're starting to see, though, a a resurgence or a emergence of a new kind of acquirer. So that whether that be craft buying craft or historically a wine portfolio like Foley, Family Wines, adding a bunch of spirits. So I think there's a new layer of folks doing smaller deals that are just not the traditional five major M&A. And then we're shooting this just before Christmas. I'm sure many of the folks will be watching this in the first quarter of 2025. And I project that the M&A market in let's say first half of 2025 is going to be really dynamic. It's been a really hard 2 years in the alcohol space. There's a lot of models that maybe didn't quite work. And there's folks that had just enough gas to get into the fourth quarter, the traditional peak. But I think there's going to be a lot of small to mid-sized brands counting their pennies in the first quarter of 2025 and realizing that their model may not be able to carry them to October of 2025. And at that point, sort of forcing the issue, even though it's probably at a lower valuation or maybe on terms the sellers weren't really looking for. I think the number of sellers being driven to the market is going to be higher than the number of buyers in the short term. And that's just going to present an opportunity for the right acquiring folks to get really great deals on hopefully some assets that in the long run provide some great value.
A buyer's market, a classic buyer's market. Very interesting.
Timing is such an important part of business.
Indeed. We are seeing an immense amount of activity. The pendulum is swinging back for deal activity for various reasons. And what you just said is one of the reasons we've observed as well. So interesting. I love to hear practitioners and technicians and entrepreneurs giving their perspective of the industry. So thank you for that as well. You want to talk about growth obstacles, anything like that? Is that biggest lessons learned? Any growth plans in the next year, 3 years, 5 years for you? Anything like that you want to talk about?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest impediments and honestly deciders of who's successful over the next 18 months in the beverage alcohol space is access to liquidity. Overall, consumers are still drinking. If we're about to have a number of brands either scale back or be off the shelves, that's going to create new opportunities for growth in either the back half of 25 or into 26 and 27. Somebody's still going to be making the wine, the whiskey, and the beer, but in some ways we're oversaturated. I live in a small town of 10,000 people. We now have 11 breweries. I can't even name them all.
Yeah.
That's just a far cry from 10 years ago when we had two. Yeah. And therefore, if you wanted good craft beer, you had to visit one. But not only are those 11 competing with each other, but there now is much better access at the grocery store and quite frankly at the gas station to the macro level craft like New Belgium, Sam Adams, Dogfish Head that just wasn't there 10 years ago.
100%.
So the competition has really raised the bar and we've got to have this shakeout. Same with spirits. If you're just buying bulk whiskey, throwing it in a bottle, telling a story about your grandpappy running from the feds, that's been done. And I don't know that you're connecting with consumers the way you did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was novel that we were a New York bourbon. So if I walked into a liquor store and said, will you carry this New York bourbon? I usually first had to prove to the liquor store owner that I could legally do it. Now they have a whole section. And there's more people that want to be in that section than the stores have ability to give.
Yeah.
So the market has really changed. And that access to liquidity and that access to capital is just going to be a defining feature of who makes it through these next 12 to 18 months. And those that do are going to have a great head start on people either choosing to enter the industry as it ramps up or even just against those who are damaged in it. I mean, it's a business life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. What are your thoughts or plans for the next 1, 3, 5 years?
So Black Button's in a unique place. We pivoted in 2020 kind of away from our main brand. We still have our main brand, but we decided selling New York whiskey to New Yorkers worked. And the access to capital, the amount of money it was going to take to sell New York whiskey to folks in Texas and Colorado, et cetera, was probably beyond us. Now we'll still have to see where that goes. Our bourbon cream recently unseated the major Irish cream
Come on.
JetBlue.
Get
And we
out.
now, for the next 2 years, we'll have all of the JetBlue cream liqueurs. It's supposed to be 500,000 bottles a year. They're running 300% of projection currently. So at the moment, we are making bourbon cream to beat the band for JetBlue worldwide. And that has generated a lot of positive pieces for our brand. And then the other big piece for us is that we ended up opening a co-packing division. So we call that the Strategic Sourcing Hub by Black Button Distilling, or just the Hub for short. But we're doing a lot of the back office work, getting bottles for other people filled. There's a whole set of folks that want to have a liquor brand, whether it be a lifestyle brand or a vision, but they don't have the equipment, the licenses, the knowledge to actually operate the distillery. So we intentionally built our new large facility on University Avenue to be able to accommodate that. And we've been bringing clients in almost every week. In fact, I just bought my 4th bottling line in order to help accommodate some of that volume. And so, kind of divide and conquer, allowing the folks where marketing and brand management and distribution management is their forte, and then production and legal compliance and all those things are our forte. We're able to make some great relationships, help these folks bring their dreams to reality. And there's some major brands that you would probably be surprised are getting bottled at our facility. I can't, unfortunately, because the NDAs disclose them. But if you ever turn a bottle around and it says produced and bottled in Rochester, New York.
Clue.
The only distillery in Rochester, New York. So I don't know where else it would have come
Strong clue. I'll keep my eyes out for it.
But yeah, that's going to lead to kind of a unique next 12 to 36 months for us. Just the clients we have committed for 2025 are going to require us to more than 3x our output. And although the facility and everything was built to scale for that, that's going to be a good undertaking. And at the moment, we're still bringing on new clients when they're a good fit for us. And so we very well may end up quite a bit bigger at the end of 2025 than we are here at the end of 2024.
Well, I sincerely hope so. So do you have any advice for Alan, who aspires to put a still in his garage and eventually take this to some commercial production aspiration or dream? Should I keep doing my day job, or is this something that's still an opportunity for somebody, or something in the middle? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I do not think that this is a good business to be in part-time. Your distributors, your liquor stores, they want to meet with you during their business hours. If you're not in a position to commit 100%, you're going to get your lunch eaten by people who aren't. And you have to remember, there's the top 5 producers of alcohol make 75% of the alcohol in this country. They are well-funded, capitalized. I'm not saying there aren't ways to beat them, but you have to pour your whole heart and soul into it. The second part I would recommend, we really did see most brands the last 10 years putting that small still in their garage or in a rented space, taking a year to get licensed, taking another year to figure out if the whiskey, how to make the whiskey or the gin, and then trying to market the product. The problem is most of them run out of money before that happens. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be us. I certainly am a convert because of our co-packing, but the clients I see that find an existing distillery, partner with them, write a really good contract where the roles are clear, and then the entrepreneur can focus on marketing and distribution management and gaining market share.
Capital.
While their production partner focuses on making the really high quality stuff, is truly the business model that is going to see folks catapult to the next level. If it's your dream to make whiskey, I'm not trying to stop you, but I would highly recommend to get really, really local. What can you realistically sell in your tasting room, in your hometown? If quite honestly, we still sell 99% of Black Button branded product within 3 hours of where it is made. And we've been at this for 12 years. And that means we still have lots of room to grow in New York City and places in like the Hudson Valley. But this is becoming a very local game if your funding is limited. It's $3 to $4 million to in marketing dollars to launch each state just to get your foot in the door. That's not necessarily where you're breaking even on that state, and that's not necessarily where you're the product. That's just where you start to stabilize. So that implies that for it to go well to cover all 50 states, you need somewhere between 150 and $250 million. And we have seen people take that amount of money and walk away a few years later with nothing to show for it. I don't like to make bets quite that big. I like to do mine one step at a time. And I think that would be probably my last piece of advice for somebody getting ready for this. This is an industry where success is measured in decades. I mean, this past Saturday, the 21st of December marked 11 years from when we opened to the public to the day.
Happy anniversary.
And thank you. And again, I will reiterate that we have only really conquered upstate New York, and in the next 5 years, we'll see how we do in downstate New York, and we're one of the lucky ones.
Great advice. I interviewed a brewer last month, and the story was a little different. Far lower barrier to entry and capital outlay in the beer world as compared to the bourbon/spirits world. So this is a very nice contrast to a previous discussion. Thank you very much with that.
And as kind of a follow-up to that, there are plenty of people starting distilleries with $500,000 to $5 million. I just would encourage those folks to have a really focused business plan. If you're in a ski town like Lake Placid or somewhere else where there's a large tourist draw,
right?
There's still great opportunities to be making whiskey, vodka, and gin and build that local community sense, especially like, again, vacation destinations like the Outer Banks or Cape Cod. But if you're just in the middle of nowhere and expecting that all these people in these cities are just going to want your product, my question at that point is, what would make your product different?
Sure.
And it's worth pointing out that they're, again, novel and unusual business cases are probably some of the ones to focus on. There's a gentleman mixing pickle juice with vodka, the original pickleback. He is selling more per month in his third year than I am after 10 years in a year. And picklebacks, it's not I'm not denigrating the product, but it's not about how it's made. It's about the occasion that it meets. And it serves a wide need. Apparently there's a lot more people that drink pickleback shots than I realized.
Same here.
And I unfortunately don't have the passion to go after that, nor do I want to copy him. But if you can find a unique thing, and maybe that would be another piece of advice I would give to people. When I started Black Button, it was about what I wanted out of whiskey, and I wanted to convince others that they too wanted that out of whiskey. And again, we convince thousands of people a month to do that. But the whole reason our co-packing has been so much more successful, and therefore you, an entrepreneur, would be more successful, is that we finally wised up to it's not about us. It's about what does the market want. And what can I give that people are willing to pay? What problem can I solve for them? And there was no New York co-packer at scale that could could help these New York City clients. And we now fit that mix and are growing way faster than we ever have. So my question to somebody new to the industry, again, I'm not suggesting that that's your route to market, because do you have the experience and the capital and the equipment and the know-how and the context to do that? But who is your target customer? What do they want? Is it convenience? Is it more options? Is it a better quality something? but find out what people want and then go make that. And it's good if that also aligns with something you like, because you're going to drink a lot of this stuff, but better to find out what consumers want to buy and give it to them than try to convince consumers they want to buy what you're selling.
Yeah.
Pull models are way better than push models. And how do you test that and find that out so that you can really meet that need?
To your point earlier, there's, from an entrepreneurial perspective, there's a technical aspect of it or a technician or craft aspect of it. But at the end of the day, every business is still a business, and it requires capitalization. And to this discussion, marketing, right? Like the market needs to be aware that you're producing something that they actually want, right? How do you do that? Through sales and marketing, through capitalization, through throughput, through process, through relationships and contracts, all of the above from the entrepreneurial world. Using somebody like Bruckman Media for your marketing campaign is, one of the ways of getting something out there like that, where the market becomes aware of a high quality product. It's still a business, right? This is beyond most likely just a hobby.
And I think that is what so many folks in the beer, wine, and spirits, there's a cachet, right? You own a wine estate, you've got a brewery, you're making your own whiskey. But first and foremost, it's a business. And unless you're independently wealthy and can just fund those losses forever, how are you going to make that engine economically turn? And how are you going to do it in ways that people that don't have to make it turn?
Right.
I mean, again, back to the M&A. Di Serono bought Sagamore. Sagamore was started by Chris Platt of Under Armour fame. They never had to turn a profit.
Nope.
It wasn't a problem because he had made his money elsewhere. And if you look around at the business models of a lot of the wineries, again, that is the model. Someone who made money elsewhere and has money to burn and finds this a pleasurable way to spend their time. If that's not you, are you sure you want to compete with them? Or could you do something where they are the customers? I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, who got rich during the gold rush? The guy selling the shovels. They didn't care if they found gold. They sold the shovel at a great markup because they got it across the country. And if one guy petered out, they'd buy it back cheap and resell it by the afternoon. And I have come to find that business models where you're selling shovels to people that need them is a lot better than out in the hills hunting for gold.
There's the B2B model, business to business, and there's the B2C model, business to consumer. I've always liked B2B in my entrepreneurial background, if I had a preference.
And again, that just depends on what people want. There's a wonderful distillery in Buffalo that hosts really great weddings. I can't imagine a better place to get married in Buffalo. And yet you won't find their products in hardly any liquor stores. They're really a wedding venue that happens to make some rum downstairs. But that's a pretty cool bent. And they're in the wedding business, not really in the spirits business.
Indeed.
And that's okay. If that's what they want, that can be a good model. Yep. And again, how does that work for you, the entrepreneur? What melds what you want with what the world wants with what you can get paid for?
Anything you're looking forward to in the next 6 to 12 months?
I was going to say, most of the things for me at this point revolve around my family. And my daughter, who is 4 years old, is starting ice hockey practice for Sunday of the year. She very much wants to play ice hockey. And I am very interested to see how a coach can contain a unruly 4-year-old and teach her to skate and shoot a puck. So that's kind of the highlight in my life at the moment. From a business standpoint, we've never had a better team than we have today. The managers, the front line, we're just moving and grooving. And I'm so excited to see these folks continue to come together, continue to figure out problems, continue to serve customers, and take this to a whole nother level. Most businesses, facing a 300 to 400% volume increase in the next 12 months would be very concerned. I'm very excited, especially because we've done it time after time after time. We've been in 5,000 companies, 6 out of the last 7 years. I think we're going to hit that level again in 2025. And it's just a beautiful thing to be a part of as these folks really step up and just gel. It's a lot of fun.
Outstanding. Jason, last question. What is your Christmas drink of choice?
In the morning, it's probably bourbon cream in my hot cocoa. But certainly, by the time all the relatives show up, I'll have poured an old fashioned.
Outstanding.
Full test bourbon.
Outstanding.
Helps smooth things out.
Indeed. Jason Barrett, president and founder of Black Button Distillery. Thank you very much for your time today. So take that bottle and show it right up to the camera so we can close with that shot. Perfect. Jason, thank you.